wildlife rehabilitators. Once we have them by their legs and their feet, we know that we might get a little tiny tap with a beak or a hit with a beak. But again, the crushing power is in the feet, not that face. Their beaks are so valuable to them as a knife and fork, they cannot risk injuring those beaks or breaking that tip, which is what they're using to rip and tear their food. So when you see a bird of prey close to a handler, and usually people ask, aren't you afraid it's going to bite you or nip you in the eye or whatever it is? And the answer is usually no, because we have them by their feet. Now, our goal as wildlife rehabilitators, again, is to get them back to where they belong. But since nowadays, 98% of the injuries that we are dealing with, there are kittens here. So if you're hearing that sound and you're wondering what it is, we have...
It's not a bird.
It's not a bird. We have 2 baby kittens whose eyes just opened, also rescued orphaned little kittens that are still being cared for by a human caregiver in this case. So it's kind of funny to hear it. So anyway, back to, what was I just saying?
Oh. They're not going to poke you because they want the knife sharp.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we've been there. All right, let's move on from that. What was I saying? Well, okay. Oh, I know what I was saying. Goal is to get them back into the environment. So for the birds that can't go back, because 98% of the injuries that we're seeing at our center have to do with all of us as humans. So what might be something that is related to us that causes an injury? Any guesses? What do you suppose is our #1 injury we're seeing with birds of prey? How's that?
Cars.
Excellent, that's it. 85% are struck by vehicles. 85%, that's most of them. Now, birds are designed to be light. They have a lot of feathers, they have hollow bones. They're not as weighted as you might see. When you see like a bald eagle, you look at a bald eagle, usually you think, oh, that thing's gotta weigh 25 pounds, minimum 30, maybe even 50, right? Bald eagles in Connecticut weigh between 8 and 12 pounds on average. That's it. An average red-tailed hawk is about 4 pounds. That's it. But it still gets heavy when you're holding a bird for a presentation. So again, 98% have to do with injuries related to humans, car strikes being #1. What might be another way that these birds might find conflict with us? There's a lot of obvious ones.
Maybe caught up in something that...
Entanglements.
Turbines.
Yep, turbines, of course. Garbage entanglements, so things like balloon ribbon, fishing line, 6-pack ring holders, blueberry netting, rope, clotheslines, anything like that. Garbage entanglements, you were going to say.
That's like...
Dogs and cats, absolutely. Caught by dog, caught by cat. We call them C by C or C by Ds. Those guys, that's a real issue. We see that a lot. And usually when a bird or any mammal, little creature, gets caught by a cat, cats have what we refer to as a dirty mouth. They have a bacteria in their mouth. And when they bite into a little creature, their teeth are designed to be puncture teeth. And bird skin kind of heals over real quick, so they can puncture into a bird skin, inject that bacteria. 3 days later, that bird is going to die. Or that little mammal critter is going to die after being bit by a cat, unless it's treated with an antibiotic. So we do see a lot of problems with dogs and cats, of course. Things like window collisions, glass. Birds don't recognize glass. They run into glass in so many of our buildings, and the reflection adds to that. So they don't understand something solid's there, and then add the sun or the moon casting that reflection. Confusing. Habitat destruction. Of course, we're making more and more buildings and more roadways and more parking lots and more condominiums. And there's more and more, or less and less, I should say, wild spaces. So these animals are now being found in our own backyards more so than ever. We're sharing space with all kinds of wildlife nowadays. Then there are people that use something called rodenticide. Who's heard about the rodenticides? Rodenticides, usually it's to kill mice or rats. It's a poison. People put it out, the mouse or the rat comes along and eats that poison. They've ingested that into their body. You like to talk about what that is. It's Coumadin usually, it's some kind of blood thinner.
It's blood thinners that they use for humans. And in the case of mice, for example, they don't die instantly or very quickly, but they do die from internal bleeding. And they can scamper away.
They can continue to live for a while before the effects of that rodenticide actually finishes them out. What that means is they become easy prey, easy targets for things like birds of prey or any other animal for that matter. It can be your dog or your cat in the backyard sees something that's easy to catch and they can ingest that, and we call it secondary poisoning. Cutting down of trees. Lots of people cut down unsightly dead trees on their properties because they don't want those trees because they're dead or they're ugly, or they could become a safety concern depending on where that tree is. Lots of those trees house cavity-dwelling mammals and birds. So that's another way we lose a lot of these creatures. So you see there's so many things that humans are doing nowadays that cause issue or conflict with the wildlife. And because 98% are coming to us because of conflicts with humans, our goal is to point out some things we can all do to make a difference so we can coexist better. So things like obvious picking up fishing line. We bring these little props with us for the kids, but we find even with adults that it's very effective to share and show everybody what we're talking about. Fishing line is a great entanglement problem because it's meant to grab and tangle, and it's meant to hold a lot of weight, doesn't break easy. So any animal getting tangled up in this is in big trouble because it's very thin as well, and it can cut right through to the bone, through the tendons. It can cause all kinds of damage and affect whatever wild animal might be caught up in it. Recycling. We all recycle. Obviously, nowadays, it's very rare for people to not recycle. But one step that really needs to be emphasized is everybody needs to really rinse out the containers before they're thrown in the recycle bin. Any container that ends up out there, most of our recycle bins are open lids. Any recyclable product that ends up out there that has not been rinsed out is going to possibly attract a little critter who comes along and sticks their head inside to eat or lick the rest of the food. And obviously, little critters get their heads stuck all the time. How many of you might save a little skunk if you saw a skunk like this? Come on, you wouldn't save a little skunk stuck like this who's gonna wander possibly into traffic or get preyed upon by a big great horned owl or fall into the river. Come on, you wouldn't save it? I know you would. If you saw a skunk walking along, just so you know, skunks only spray when they feel threatened. So in a situation like this, it would be terrified, of course, but dark and quiet for any animal who is having an issue is critical to helping them. Dark and quiet is what we tell everybody when they've contained an animal that's in distress. Get it in a box, keep it dark and quiet, don't play the music, everything you can do to make everything calm. Like our travel boxes here for our bird friends. They're in boxes with air holes. There's not big giant windows for them to view you and for you to view them for a reason, because dark and quiet makes them secure. So a skunk in this situation, if you come across one ever, which you might now that I've brought it up, you can actually remove and help remove the whatever container over its head, and likely won't get sprayed unless you're handling that skunk too much and it's terrified after. Then you take it off and you talk very gently to it and walk away. We've done it before, so we know it's not usually a time that you're going to get hurt. Things like the 6-pack ring holders. We've all seen this before, and we all know about this, and I'm sure all of you at this point know you're supposed to do what with the 6 and the 8-pack ring holders. Cut them, exactly. So you're supposed to cut those rings, because this stuff, even though it's plastic, is not recycled in Connecticut. It's a real shame, because it's going to end up in our landfills. We throw out tons of good food. Tons of it. So animals know that our landfills are a place to go to find food. So animals, even if this is thrown out correctly, animals can get tangled up in it if it's not cut up. But better yet, we can nowadays purchase carbonated beverages in the larger bottles that are recyclable or cans in boxes and eliminate this piece of garbage altogether, because this piece of plastic is not going to ever go away. It's going to break down into particle-sized pieces and probably enter the soil or our waterway and end up in the ocean, floating around in the ocean with that big garbage mound that's become like its own island. So it's dangerous stuff. The best thing we can all do is limit our plastic use or reuse whatever plastic that we are incorporating into our convenient lives. So it's a real important one.
You mentioned windows as being one of the dangers that cause injury. there's a number of things that can be done. I can remember a time when people did not want to put anything on their windows because they wanted to look nice and clean and sparkly. But for families with children, these are fun for the kids because they can arrange them. They're the gel sticks. They can take them off, rearrange them, and just, when they're not sticky, just wash them off with a little soap and water, and they're good to go again. One of the things, I've got to get a spider web.
Yes.
That's my favorite.
This time of year, it's easier to find them.
Yes. What we do have with us, we don't have the spider web, but we do have these window alert stickers. They come in 2 or 3 different, this happens to be leaves. And birds see objects in ultraviolet light differently than we do. If we put, it's hard to see because this is small, if we put the stickers on our window, it looks pretty much like this. You can't really see it unless you're right up on top of it. But birds see this, and they will stay away from it because they don't know what's there. A lot of folks will hang things either outside or inside in front of the window, little objects, like somebody said, look at the discs.
CDs or DVDs?
Yep, just
They're
hang
reflective on one side.
piece of ribbon, the wind will blow them around, whatever's moving, they'll stay away from. And I'll let you talk about yours.
This is my favorite. Now we have at our center, where a place called Hope is located, by the way, we're just an hour and 4 minutes from here. Not real easy to get to, but worth coming out if you're into birds of prey, because it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to go through our entire center and meet the many different species, including a bald eagle. We've got falcons, bald eagles, we've got ravens, we've got crows, we've got hawks, we've got owls, we've got vultures. There's a lot of birds there to see.
Ducks.
Ducks and doves, mourning doves, yeah. So you see, we're very busy with the birds. However, since they see in the ultraviolet light spectrum, at our center we have these big windows on a log cabin home. Okay, so big giant glass windows. We put up those ultraviolet light stickers. They're gonna work, they're gonna be great because the birds see that violet coloration, they're gonna avoid the windows. Well, guess what? They were hidden in between the stickers, which really upset me because here we are at a bird sanctuary, a bird rescue with birds flying into the window. You can't have that. So I called a local songbird rehabilitator who said, Christine, duh, the ultraviolet light marker. Now, how many of you, and you seem the right age to me, that when you were a little younger, there was a game called Secret Pen or Secret Ghost Writer Pens or something like that, where you got to take the little ultraviolet light marker and write notes to each other, and then you get this little tiny black light and you can read those notes and you can have your little secret code and all of that. So it was a great game. Those are ultraviolet light markers. There is a better pen that's sold on Amazon. That's where I got this one. It's a Nissan brand. It looks more like a Sharpie. It's a bigger, thicker pen. This is fantastic because it's only $5 or so. It is affordable, and if you draw on the glass, the birds can see whatever you draw. Now, I was able to draw whatever I wanted and write whatever notes I wanted to my husband back at the center, and it was really fun because we don't have black light, so he doesn't get to see what I wrote, so it's fun.
Don't know if it was a good note or bad.
There's a mixture going on there. There's a mixture of messages in those as well. So we're going to get the first bird out, but while Grace is getting our first bird out, I want to really stress that these birds that we're sharing with you tonight are not in rehabilitation. These birds are recovered from their injuries and cannot go back to the wild due to the nature of their injuries. So these birds are basically rerouted in their lives. They were on their life path. They were sharing themselves with the wild. They had partners, mates, families, what have you, environments, territories, all of that. And their lives were disrupted because of us humans. And their lives had to take an entirely different course. We have a splat mat.
That's never happened to me.
Yeah, right. The splat mat is very important. Like any animal who is facing a threat, the fight or flight response will come into play. These birds take one look at this room and automatically understand that our eyes are on the fronts of our faces facing forward. We are predators. Regardless if you're a vegetarian or even vegan, it does not matter. Your eye placement says you are a predator to another predator. So that's a universal way for these birds to recognize other predators. Prey animals, picture a mouse, the eyes on the side of the head, gives them that extra peripheral vision to watch out for predators. So when they first come out of their boxes, they see all of us and lighten the load for their escape route. So that's hence the splat mat. And they don't like to go to the bathroom in the boxes, they really don't. Yeah. So these birds cannot return to the wild, that's what I said.
Anybody know what this is by any chance?
Oh,
Whoa.
woohoo! That's somebody who's been looking
I know where
up.
that came from.
Do you know if it's a male or female?
Take a guess. Come on, you're on a roll.
Somebody else.
I'm gonna guess it's a male. That's a pretty, no.
What's the sound they make when it's wrong?
We should
This
ask it
is
what
a
it is.
female. Her name is Eche. That is Egyptian for life. And she had a life that was disrupted. Can you see the lingering damage or injury?
What do you think's going on there?
Exactly. She has a wing that is never going to be normal. That's why she cannot be set free again. Her injury has healed as much as it's going to. Her condition now is not life-threatening in any way, shape, or form. In fact, the birds that are kept in captivity can double their life expectancy, which surprised me at first till I stopped to think about it. And it's just because when they're in captivity, they're fed regularly, they don't have to hunt, they're protected from the elements, they don't have to worry about snow or rain or wind, and they are protected from predators
And illness.
and illness. They're really, where are you going?
She's
she
showing you
always
her
turns
beautiful
around to
tail.
show you how beautiful her back is with her feathers and gorgeous tail. I love the way they spread their tail, and I love the way they are able, a little bit of what she was doing. If you get to see one in the wild, they like to hover. They like to live in woods that are around an open field. They love those open fields for hunting because they not only eat little rodents and little mammals, they like meaty, juicy bugs. And they will hover over, well, sometimes in fields there's bushes that may be this high, and they like to hover over the grass or around the bush to see if they can flush out like these meaty, juicy bugs. And usually what they're looking for is their favorite little crunchy, juicy bug, which is grasshoppers or crickets. I've seen some cute pictures when they have a moth and the wings are out there almost as
cute.
wide as their heads. But not cute for the moth, but I think it's cute. Anyway, this, she's demonstrating something that's different about with most predators. Male and female red-tailed hawks look the same in terms of their feathers and their coloring. Same with bald eagles. Same with most of the raptors, except,
Sorry.
aren't you glad they're attached? And we can show you that a little bit more clearly with one of the bigger birds. But in American kestrels, the males and females are not colored the same. Their feathers I guess the best comparison would be, the difference if you see cardinals, the difference in how bright the males are and the females just aren't so much. And it's the same way with these guys. The males, notice
She'll
how
bite you if you get close.
she watches every little move. And that has to do, I think, with their nervous system. Because if this was a hawk on my arm, I could do that. They wouldn't pay that much attention. But these guys, they've got all these little neurons, firing so fast. They take in a lot more than us and a lot more than most animals. Anyway, the male has got more of the slate-looking blue and more browns and just more brightly colored.
And the male also has a solid tail and no striping.
Oh, right. The males also have one thing that she has. You see those streaks under her eyes? places, some books will call them mustaches, some will call them streaks. But who do you think may have copied or gotten an idea from kestrels and falcons?
King Tut.
Hmm?
King Tut. That's why we went with the Egyptian theme, by the way, from all that makeup.
Yeah.
But
Some
who
of the
knows
more
what the black?
recent, more
Who knows
recent.
what the black line under the eyes are for?
Baseball players and football players.
But
Exactly.
why?
The sun.
The
The
glitter.
sun.
Yep.
They got the idea from the falcon family.
Exactly. And another interesting thing, you can see a couple spots on the back of their heads. And from a distance, from something that's up higher than them, when they look down, it resembles eyes. So they tend to stay away from them, thinking that they've lost the element of surprise. And in Hartford, when we've had the Peregrine Falcons nesting up there, they would go up and try to tag them. Because at the time this was going on, there were very few Peregrine Falcons in the state. And they're really not, they haven't bounced back and done as well as bald eagles have in returning, but they are on the upsweep. So anyway, if a parent saw them coming up on the building, getting ready to grab one of their babies, they would come down so fast and so hard, it could kill somebody. So it was suggested to them that they put on helmets or hard hats. Well, one of them tried that and got hit by a bird so hard that the helmet went flying. Somebody else, probably a rehabilitator, said, take a magic marker or black paint and put 2 circles that look like eyes a bit. They did that and weren't bothered, were able to do it more successfully. So those little things actually do work.
So one thing I just want to point out, because we did say this is an American kestrel, it's the smallest falcon in North America. So it does belong to the falcon family.
Right.
Worldwide, we have 10 different families of birds of prey. In Connecticut, there are 8 families. So we have a great state for looking up, paying attention to the sky. Once you start honing in and seeing birds, especially birds of prey, I guarantee you, you'll start to find more. As you see something and become familiar with it, it becomes more a part of your regular everyday. So looking up really does help connect you to nature.
And not just birds of prey, they're
Awesome.
beautiful, beautiful songbirds and all kinds out there. And if you look for one, and then you'll see others and think, wonder what that one is. And then maybe you'll go get a book to identify what you're seeing, and then maybe you'll start keeping a list. Anyway, I was getting ready to tell you, I'm sorry, I'm making you dizzy, huh? I was getting ready to tell you how she injured that wing, and it was from balloon ribbon. The balloons are dangerous in a number of ways because kids love to watch them go up, but eventually they come down. If they land in the water, they kind of float along, and fish I've discovered with lures and whatever they have in bait shops. I go in to get bait for some of the birds, and I think, why would a fish eat that? But they do. They grab anything
That's
that's
shiny.
floating in the water, and yeah, they do particularly like shininess. And if you picture a whale's mouth, when they open that mouth and close it to eat shrimp or krill or whatever they're after, those things go right in along with the food, and they don't even know it. So those are very dangerous. Also, the ribbon attached to them is very dangerous, and that's what happened to Etchie. She got caught somehow in the ribbon, maybe it was hanging in a tree.
It was.
And she got it wrapped around her wing, and they don't understand. We understand a process for, like removing a fish hook or removing things that are tangled around us. They don't think that way. So they just fight it and pull and fight it and pull, and it got so tight that it fractured her wing. And by the time we got her, it was too late to do anything about that.
So as wildlife rehabilitators, again, our goal is to get them back to the wild as quick as possible. And remember in the beginning I said birds have hollow bones to keep them light and buoyant. Hollow bones can break sort of easy with the right kind of pressure. but they can mend very quickly. So when we get a long bone in a bird that's been broken, not an elbow, not a wrist, not the fingers necessarily in the joints or an ankle, but any of the long bones, if we set that bone and wrap it, 2 weeks, that's all it takes. 2 weeks in a wrap. We take that wrap off, and then we do physical therapy, and chances are that bird is going to go back to freedom. But if it's in a joint, joints have many bones involved. So in her case, it was her left wrist, and it was many bones, and it fused in position. So you can tell that she can't fold that wing in the same way as she can fold in her other wing. So that wrist is now not able to do her hunting style of hovering. So she can fly. It's what we call clumsy flight. She can fly, but not well enough to hover and not well enough to sustain herself and find food. So she is now going to live with us forever.
And not only with us. What we've done with all of our birds, we separate them by species, and we try to make sure that they're not alone. We fix all of their aviaries. If they can't get up to a perch, we give them a handicap ramp. And part of what we do to make their life easier and to enrich it is have others of the same species. And they do pretty well. We have 2 or 3 bonded couples. She's one of them. She lives with a male American kestrel, and they met at a place called Hope, and they fell in love.
They did.
Now, what is a little hard to explain and understand is that what happens when you get married and you fall in love, you have babies. And they'd like very much to have babies, and she lays eggs every year, but we can't let them hatch. Because I did this.
Oh, not fair.
But it's because they're both captive. They can never be free. And if they hatch out, let's say 4 babies, those babies are going to have to live in captivity their whole lives. Because if captive birds cannot teach them how to be wild and free.
Where to hunt.
So it just doesn't make any sense to bring them in the world if we can avoid it. And what we do is we addle the eggs, which you can do by shaking them or making pinholes in each end. And they don't hatch, and eventually the birds get tired, the hormones kind of ebb out a bit, and they get tired of sitting on them, and that'll be the end of that till next year. Now sometimes they get smart and they know when we've messed with their eggs, they just kick them out of the nest and lay more. So we've had to substitute other eggs for them. What kind
The
of
barn
chicken?
owl. It's just a small chicken.
Yeah,
She lays
it's a-
small enough eggs that it matches the barn owl.
About the
doses
same
as well.
size.
So this is the sound of the American kestrel, which is on the state threatened list in Connecticut. So if you should look up and see one, which you could, because you do live, as we drove out here, it seems to me there's still a lot of open space around here. So anywhere that there's farmland and pastures, look up on the edge lines of those fields to look for birds similar to this. And they sound like this. Now, one of the profiles of them, when you're on the ground looking at them, they tend to bob their heads and bob their tails quite a bit. They twitch their tails a lot and bob their heads. And that has a lot to do with focusing on what it is they're looking at. Now, all birds of prey think about one thing at a time, because their eyes are very developed inside their skulls, and most of them have very large eyes in comparison to what we have. We have a lot more space in our skull cavities for our brains. So their brains are smaller. It does not mean they're not smart. It just means that they are not multitaskers for the most part. These guys can't walk and play on their cell phones. They have to be very in tune with their environment and focus on one thing at a time. And that does explain why so many of them do get struck by vehicles, because when they are hunting the roadways or looking for prey, they target, again, that predator, eyes in front, born to hunt, they target their prey animals until they either grab it or miss it. So when there's a car coming, they often just don't understand that. Now the next species coming out, we're going to do a little comparison. We're a little tangled. My goodness. What happened here? It was a long ride and a bumpy walk over from Garage D or wherever we were. Okay. Let's get up on the level. I gotta hurry up and get to the splat map. Okay, a nocturnal species in comparison to our diurnal raptor. Now, if you look at that diurnal bird, you can tell she's designed for a little bit more speed and accuracy maybe, with that long tail, those sharp pointy wings. If she were full and able-bodied, she could fly pretty fast being a falcon. She'd be able to maneuver through branches and be very agile. Whereas you look at the shape of this body and you just don't get that impression, right? This is an owl. This is a small species of owl. This is not a baby. This owl is actually probably 9 or 10 years of age at this point. It's on the older side. And remember, Grace just said that in captivity, these birds will often double their life expectancy. In the wild, this species of owl can live on average between 3 to 7 years if they're in the right area and lucky to not have conflicts with us humans. This owl has outlived that. So that's part of the captive life it is living. Does anyone know what kind of owl this is? Okay, that's fine, because most of us think about an owl. We automatically have owl from Winnie the Pooh in our minds. Usually it's a great horned owl, the big owl with the feather tufts on top of its head. Or we might think of any other owls that people like here. Or we just think of owls or owls. There are 8 different species of owls that we can see in Connecticut, guys. That's a lot of different kinds, and this is not the smallest of them. There is one that is about up to, this is Kokopelli, by the way. His name is Kokopelli. Kokopelli's wing here. There's an owl in Connecticut that stands just a little bit above this wing, called the northern saw-whet owl. It's tiny. This one's very small too. It's called the Eastern Screech Owl. Anyone ever hear of that? Okay, so we have the northern saw-whet owl. We have the Eastern Screech Owl. We have the barn owl. We have the long-eared owl, the short-eared owl. We have the great horned owl. And we have the barred owl. And we have a visitor, if we're lucky in the winter, the snowy owl. The one we all know about, the snowy owl from Harry Potter, of course. So snowy owls do not live in Connecticut year-round, but they can be seen in the winter. The Eastern Screech Owl with those great big feather tufts on top of the head there, those are not ears, these are just feathers, and they're mood indicators. They actually help us to determine the mood of an owl that actually sports those feather tufts. They're just feathers, but like a cat or a horse. When a cat or a horse is irritated or upset or mad, what does it do with its ears? Doesn't say yes. What does it do with its ears? Come on. Puts its ears back, flat on the head, right? Flat on the head. This bird, if he were upset right now, those feather tufts can lay flat down on his head and it looks like he's got a rounded head. It doesn't look like he has those feather tufts at all. So we know that his mood is, well, he's a little tall and skinny right now, just a little bit. His eyes are a little squinty. I just woke him up. He would much rather be in that box sleeping after the bumpy ride here too. I'll tell you what. I felt so bad for them on the way over because we're bumping along with all the cobble and all the cracks and stuff and the pavement. And if you look at the wheels on our cart, it's actually a cart for studio equipment. So it's not even like the big puffy wheels that take to absorb any of those bumps. But Kokopelli here, he would normally about this time of night start waking up. Back at our center, there are boxes in the aviaries where this particular species likes to sleep inside of. They are cavity nesters. So remember in the beginning I was talking about cutting down trees, and sometimes those dead trees are homes to cavity nesters. This happens to be really one of those cavity nesters. They take over the old woodpecker holes. All owls don't build nests. They either take over already built nests or holes or crevices. So it's very important to understand that sometimes a woodpecker-holed tree is actually a great home for a predator such as Kokopelli here. The Eastern Screech Owl used to be the most common owl in our state. There is another owl that has since taken on that title, and it's going to be the next one that does come out. But Kokopelli here, you can tell what's wrong with him immediately just by looking at him, sort of like when you saw Eshe and her wing. You can see that his wing is bumped out, his right wing. He broke kind of like what we call our clavicle. It's a coracoid in a bird. And he broke that bone by hitting into a window on a full moon evening. So he did not recognize something solid was there, and the reflection from that moon confused him. Birds see the reflections as a continuation of the world around them, so they don't understand that it's an image, and they sometimes will die on impact. So usually what we tell the public is, when we get the call, a bird just hit my window, what do? It's sitting on the ground, its eyes are closed, it's puffed up. We ask how long it's been there. If it just happened, we suggest waiting 45 minutes, at least 45 minutes, until you box that bird up or place the laundry basket over it, depending on the size of the bird. Because often it's stunned and it just needs a little bit of time to reacclimate, regain its senses, shake it off, and then when you approach after 45 minutes and it's aware of your presence, it may just fly away. Of course, if you see blood or if you see bones sticking out, that's a different story. Then you want to contact a wildlife rehabilitator. Now, I don't know who's in this area, but there is a map on the Connecticut DEEP website of all the licensed wildlife rehabilitators in the state, and it shows you by town who does what. So you'll see a map and it'll show you where the rehabbers are, and it'll give you a list of names with the town they live in and the animal that they specialize in. It's really important to know that, because I guarantee you at some point in your lives coming up in your near future, you will be out there and you will be faced with an animal crisis. And you'll remember the DEEP is where you're going to look for help. Because you can call the police, and guess what? They don't always know what to do. They don't always know your local wildlife rehabilitators. You can call a veterinarian hospital and you might get some help there, but it's not guaranteed. They're not also trained in this as well. We work alongside many different vet hospitals and vet staff to take care of our birds, but for the most part, they're learning about the birds from us, because wildlife's different. It's not like our pet birds or our pet dogs or our pet cats. So it's important to know where to go and who to call should you come across a wildlife crisis. Kokopelli here can't go back to the wild. Can I have a paper towel? Because I'm walking around. Okay. Can't go back to the wild because of that wing. He is, again, another clumsy flyer. Cannot do it. He does fly, but not well enough to hunt. Now, being that he is an owl and he is a he, the interesting thing about birds of prey is that in the world of birds of prey, the boys are actually about a third smaller than the girls. Why do you think the boys are smaller, guys? All right, girls, why are the girls bigger?
Because they have to sit on eggs.
Exactly. It's kind of, all of this is pretty obvious stuff. The females are going to be the ones to not only lay the eggs, but they're going to be the ones to sit on those eggs so they develop and hatch into baby birds. All baby birds, birds of prey in particular, grow to be as big as their moms and dads, are you ready for this? In 5 weeks' time. 5 weeks. 1 week past a month. 5 weeks, they're as big as mom and dad. They usually aren't flighted until 6, 6.5, or 7 weeks, sometimes a little longer. So it depends on the species. But just know, when you see a little bird like this, often people will come across an Eastern Screech Owl similar to Kokopelli here. They'll say, I've got a baby owl. There's a baby owl that needs to be rescued, and it'll be this time of year. And we know automatically from the phone call, no, you don't have a baby owl, you have a small species of owl. Because if it were a baby, it would have already grown up to adult size, and it would be flying at this point. So baby owls do tend to look different in those first 5 weeks and in the very beginning, because they do have a lot more downy feathers. Downy feathers, of course, are the fluffy feathers. They don't always have their adult feather coloration exactly, because they've got all those little kind of fuzzy stuff going on. So they're very cute. Just want to make sure you all get a real good look at these eyes, because in the world of owls, again, those eyes, if we had eyes in relation to his skull and our skulls, if we had eyes the same size as Kokopelli, we would have 2 grapefruit in our heads. Imagine having 2 grapefruit inside your skull right now. Would not leave room for much else. And in the world of these owls, it means that their design is totally different and their eyes are lacking muscles. They don't have muscles around their eyes. There's no room for muscles around their eyes. So that means they can't look up like we're going to be doing. They can't look down. They can't look to the left. They can't look to the right. They have to be able to turn their heads. A full circle is how many degrees? 360. Very good. Owls can turn their heads 270 degrees. And the reason they have to be able to do that is because of those eyes being fixed in their skulls like car headlights in a car. In order for a car headlight to shine in front of the car, you have to turn the car the direction you want to see. Same with these owls. So Mother Nature gave them 14 cervical vertebrae. What are the cervical vertebrae? The neck bones, exactly. How many do we have? Does anyone know? 7. We have 7 cervical neck vertebrae, and these guys have twice as many, which gives them that ability. Now, Grace has a little prop up front because not everybody's good with numbers. I know I'm not. And it's funner to look at the little puppet she's holding to show you how far an owl can actually turn its head.
First of all, this is how far we can go. Chin kind of shoulder to shoulder. Owls can go to the shoulder, to the back, and the next shoulder. Mm-hmm. And they do it so quickly sometimes it looks like they're going all the way around, but they're not.
That puppet really can spin its head all the way around.
Oh, that's because your dog broke it.
It's true. We had to rehabilitate that puppet. My dog got it after a program. It was a late program too. We got home, I left the bag out. The dog pulled that puppet out of the bag and ripped it apart to some degree. And we had to glue it back together.
And the nose is still crooked, the beak's gonna be crooked
Yeah,
forever.
but we did it.
Yes.
We did it. So we're gonna get the next nighttime bird out. Another owl is coming out right now, just so we can really show you a size comparison. And in fact, this one's older than the one that's coming out. And before we do that though, Grace, quickly, I just wanna do the sound of the Eastern Screech Owl. Is the Eastern Screech Owl going to screech, guys? Yes. Of course we think that. Did you turn it off? Yes, okay. That's not a screech.
Another one tangled up with you
Yeah,
guys.
it was the right. We gotta untangle.
Oh,
So that is
oh
the
my
sound of the Eastern Screech Owl.
There you go.
It's not a screech at all. Whoa, up close and personal. So,
That was fun.
James Audubon. Anyone know who James Audubon is? He's the guy that would go out and look up and study the birds and make notes about their colors, their sizes, their sounds. He was looking at an Eastern Screech Owl similar to Kokopelli here when he heard this sound. That's a pretty scary sound. Now, if you were camping and you heard this, you might pack up and go home.
It's really nothing compared to how they really sound.
And in real life, it sounds much creepier than this little sound device here. That is the sound of the barn owl, B-A-R-N, the barn owl, which is endangered in Connecticut, unfortunately. But that owl screeches like a little girl being murdered in the woods. And Kokopelli here, the Eastern Screech Owl, has that spooky horse whinny sound. So this bird was actually misnamed. And just another side note about this bird, they come in 2 colors. They're not always this beautiful russet red. They are often grayish, more like this next species. Okay.
So, this is the one that Christine was saying is now the most common owl in Connecticut, probably a good part of the extension beyond us, because in some areas they have what they call spotted owls. And they're about the same size, the coloring is similar, and their barred owl is kind of pushing them out of their area, and in some cases they're mating. And they're afraid that that whole species will be lost, but hopefully that will not happen. Now, this guy's name is Misty, and that came to us sort of because in reading and looking at pictures, these owls don't necessarily hunt in the dead of night. They like to hunt at dusk and at dawn. And this one gentleman that was writing just made such a lovely picture when he said he watched for them and see them flying low over the meadow, where some meadows there's this little mist when the sun is coming up and hitting them. So we thought that was a good name anyway. Now, Misty has been with us for quite a number of years. He came about when some kids, teenagers, called from Old Saybrook and said there was an owl on the ground. So I went down to investigate, and Misty was just sort of tried to fly. They put a box over it, tried to fly but didn't get very far. I went over and was able to pick him up immediately, and one of the things, we all develop our techniques for examining. What I try to do immediately, because the bird very often doesn't even notice it, when I pick them up, I feel them right here, because with birds of prey, the breastbone is called the keel, and it curves outward like the keel on a boat. And on either side is where they should have their strongest muscles, because those are the muscles that control the wing movements. So if you get a bird and the keel is very sharp and very pointed, you've got a bird that's starving. And that was the case with this guy. And I turned around to put him in a carrier, and there happened to be a street light, and it hit his right eye, and I could see there was a total blue film over it inside. So he was blind in that eye, and that's why he was starving to death. He wasn't seeing well enough to catch prey and survive. So I took him to the vet just to have him take a quick look and see if there was anything structural damage that might be causing pain. And when he examined him, he discovered that there was only like half vision in the other eye. So whether or not that's deteriorating over the years, we don't know. We haven't seen any sign of that yet. So that's why he is with us. He's been with us for quite some time. He had a friend for a while who was also blind in one eye. And they did beautifully together, and we designed it in such a way that instead of having food left in the usual way, we put them on a little shelf. We keep the perches. The perches have to be replaced periodically because it's wood, they're natural, and they do rot and fall apart, but we always put them in the same place. Just like you wouldn't go in a blind person's house and rearrange your furniture. They'd come home and they'd fall and bump into everything. And it's the same way with the birds, and they do very well with that. Do you want to give
The barred owl sound? Just
Oh,
talk
yes,
about
do that, and then I thought maybe...
We are we running out of time?
Yeah. We want to compare, I keep the birds out and talk about, a little bit about the next bird, because it's a hawk and an owl, and their territories can overlap, even though they eat pretty much the same foods.
Wait. All right.
Because they don't hunt at the same time. While one's hunting, the other is sleeping, so it seems to work out. Another time.
Okay.
Yes. Goodness.
Yes.
Must have been the bumps.
Okay, any guess as to what kind of hawk this is? Excellent, what gave it away? What's interesting about the red-tailed hawk, though, is they really get that russet red coloration in their tails in their second year of life. Before that, they have a striped tail pattern, so it can be very confusing if you don't know your bird species when you come across a large soaring hawk and they don't have that russet red tail. Could be a juvenile. When these hawks first hatch from their eggs, they have a slate blue coloration for their eyes, and those eyes eventually start to turn tan, and from tan they turn dark brown. And that helps us to age or gauge the age of a hawk in general. Whereas you notice Misty has liquid chocolate brown eyes. From a distance, from back table there, it probably looks like his eyes are black. They are not, they are a liquid chocolate brown. Now, this species, of course, is another diurnal raptor, daytime bird, that species being more of the nighttime hunter. So they can actually live in the same environments, because one obviously will be sleeping while the other is hunting, and one will be hunting while the other is sleeping. So it kind of works out well for them. Now, remember we were talking a little bit about pounds per square inch crushing power in the beginning of the program. The red-tailed hawk, Grace, I'm sorry, you might be in the line of fire. The red-tailed hawk's pound per square inch crushing power is between 300 to 500 pounds per square inch. So again, back to, should you come across an injured wild animal on the road, you really kind of have to know what you're doing in order to, you notice how she lifted the tail? And owls just drop, and hawks tend to be a little bit more dramatic about everything.
That's true.
So you want to know what you're dealing with before you try to help, because it's not always safe to pick up an injured animal, because that animal is going to be frightened. That animal has defenses. If you don't understand that animal's defense, you could really end up hurt. And again, back to that ratchet system with these particular style hunters, these feet, I mean, you look at those feet and you know they mean business. I mean, this is a good example of seeing those sharp talon toes. Some of her talons are over 1 inch in length, and they are meant to pierce through whatever flesh, and this bird can actually crush the skull of a small animal with the pounds per square inch crushing power. So you want to be aware, again with that ratchet system, when they grab, they don't just let go. In order for them to make their leg or their foot let go, their brain has to give that signal to let go. So when they grab something, it usually means if it struggles, they go to the next click, and they just get tighter and tighter and tighter. So if you go out and try to help a bird like this and you're not well protected, you can really end up in trouble.
But they don't always ratchet either.
Yes, that's true.
But
Sometimes
I
it's a
would
quick
never
grab.
take a chance.
Yeah, don't take a chance. So you see she's showing you how beautiful her wings are and her stomping of her feet, because she's been in that box for a while and she's feeling a little feisty. She's out of that box now, looking at all of you, and her name is Autumn, Autumn Spirit. And Autumn Spirit is a very, very spirited, wonderful ambassador bird for a place called Hope. We've had her since 2005 is about when she originally came in for an injury. She was already an adult at that time. We don't know exactly how old she is. We guess her to be about 16, maybe somewhere around there. We're not sure, but red-tailed hawks can live longer than most of the birds of prey out there, because they are the most abundant and the most adaptable species of hawk in North America. They can live in most environments, and they can eat whatever is abundant, because there's really no other predators to this particular hawk species besides those conflicts with humans that we kind of discussed and talked about. So this particular bird can live well into its 20s in the right environment. In fact, pale male in New York City, he's on his something like his
18th wife?
something like that. They do mate for life. So we're always scratching our heads with pale male, because he's outliving all of his partners. So we think that he hunts the food and brings them back and tests the food with her to see if there's rodenticide. Lots of poisoning going on in cities because of rats and mice populations. So we see a lot more of rodenticide or secondary poisoning there. So Autumn here was actually struck by a vehicle. She is one of the birds that was left with a visual problem. She is blind in her right eye. She took a hit to the entire right side of her body. Nothing was broken, but she had road rash, and that eye actually has scar tissue over it. She cannot see it all through her right eye. But watch what happens, because this is a perfect example, again, of how aware these birds are. When my hand comes up there, you see she's very much aware of what's going on the side that she can see. So in the wild, this bird would be at risk from predators on this side of her, on her right side, as well as, obviously, the car strikes again. We have had birds come to our center that have clearly been injured before we've gotten them for the current injury, and they've survived through. And getting hit by a car once, twice is not unheard of. But most animals this size and this weight, she weighs 4 pounds. He weighs...
I was going to say, let's talk about weight for a minute.
How much do you think he weighs? Any guesses? If she's 4 pounds, then he's probably 2.5. Any others?
So what was that show they used to be, go higher or lower? Lower.
Any guesses?
Price is Right.
Half a pound.
He weighs maybe between 1 pound 2 to 4 ounces, somewhere around there.
So
And
just over a pound.
part of the-
That's it. Just over 1 pound.
Yeah.
1.2 or 3 pounds is what he weighs.
I have a
That's
question
it.
about the hawk. It
Yes.
looks like the hawk is like sticking its tongue out.
Oh, excellent observation. These birds are very reptilian. Okay, so they do have scales on the parts of their bodies that don't have feathers. They have scales that actually slough off. They replace their scales just like they molt and replace their feathers. They have forks in their tongues. On the inside of that tongue, on the back part of the tongue, has 2 spikes that helps to pull food down the throat. Very reptilian. The tongues are also kind of stiffer than a mammal tongue, not as fleshy. And the reason why her mouth is open, she's exerting a lot of energy when she does her dancing and spreading of her wings. These birds are all designed to conserve energy and keep their stored reserves for fight or flight or for hunting. So they actually, when they move like that, use a lot of that stored reserve, and they get hot very easy. So like a dog who has to cool down through its mouth by panting, these birds can't sweat through their glands or on their bodies. They don't have sweat glands. So they actually cool down from their mouths. She's thermoregulating. She's a little warm. She got a little drink there. She usually likes that. When that happens, she'll often put her wings out. She loves to be spritzed under her wings as well.
Parrots
Here
do
it
the
comes.
same thing.
Yep. So sometimes, doing a little mist makes her very happy. Right, Autumn? Yes, you like that. So Autumn has a trick. She really enjoys showing her wings. And since she's been with us for so long, if you guys will all play along, and you say Autumn on the count of 3. If you all say Autumn, please show us your wings. She might do it. Do you want to do it? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Autumn, please show us your wings. Very nice. Very nice. She knows that trick.
Misty has pretty wings too.
Misty might do it. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Misty, please show us your wings.
No.
And notice the difference in sound, perhaps.
Oh, it's all the
It's a speed on my book.
silent flight. So that is a good thing if we can just say this last couple facts. Silent flight for owls. These owls, all owls are designed to conserve that energy. Again, we never see owls soaring around in the skies like we see hawks doing that. Hawks ride the heat thermals. Hawks fly just because it's fun, and they do expend that energy just to have that fun, whereas owls have very soft, velvety feathers. They also have this particular design on the leading edge of each of their 4 flight feather wing, each of the first 4 feathers, and it's a comb-like projection that sticks up, and it really is like a comb, a little comb barbed edge. And when they flap their wings, it cuts and dulls the sound of the air, giving them silent flight so they can sneak up on their prey. Whereas a hawk has a straight edge on that feather, and it cuts the air and makes that whoosh, whoosh sound. It's very, very, very unique to owls. So owls we tend to refer to as the perch and pounce birds. However, it's not unusual to see the red-tailed hawk hanging out on the lampposts because that vantage point, while they're not going to soar around looking for their prey, they're going to go up high. Skyscrapers, buildings, and cities included, lampposts along the highway, treetops, to look down and wait for that little critter to scurry along, and they'll come down and surprise attack, feet forward, grabbing their prey. Now, a red-tailed hawk has been clocked at speeds over 100 miles per hour, sometimes in that stoop grab. So, of course, we think of the Peregrine Falcon being the fastest animal. The Peregrine Falcon's been clocked over 200 miles per hour. So remember Grace was saying the Peregrine Falcon can come down and hit the back of the guy's head that's going up to tag and put those bands on those babies. And when she said that they could die, she meant it. 200 miles per hour is a lot of speed, and it's really truly a torpedo or a missile coming at you. So the latest record was 260 miles per hour. That's not typical, but that is very fast, and the force behind that bird is some power. Knocks the life right out of their unsuspecting
They
prey.
can only do that in a short-lived stoop. They
Yeah,
can't
it's
just
just
do
done.
that in the old time.
So today you met our beautiful American kestrel Esche, who is entangled in balloon ribbon. We talk about, of course, never letting go of balloons, and we would hope that you would all continue to live that rule and not ever let go of balloons on purpose. Do not take part in ceremonial releases, which is just basically public littering, because we all know what goes up must come down, and it really does affect our wildlife. What's that?
Our t-shirts have balloons on them.
That's okay, as long as they're not being released. Balloons, we're not outlawing balloons. It's just what happens to the balloons when you're done with the celebration. Never let them go. Pop them, have a popping contest for the balloons. It doesn't matter, just don't let them go because they cause problems. The next bird you met was Kokopelli. Do you remember what happened to Kokopelli? He had a bad wing because he flew into the window. So what did I teach you guys about with the ultraviolet light marker pen, most importantly. Stickers, great, because that does help. Anything hanging up in a window will help break up that reflection or show them something solid is there. Grace touched upon the spider web. This time of year, they sell those cling sticks for Halloween. Birds don't like spider webs. They avoid them at every chance they see them. They don't want that sticky stuff all over their feathers, so you can put up fake spider webs and it does help. I don't mean the actual physical cottony stuff that people put up. That's actually bad, and many birds get tangled in that. Then you met our barred owl, Misty here, who we really don't know what caused the blindness. We can assume maybe he had been a head trauma incident of some sort, may have been hit by a car, we're not 100%. And then, of course, last but not least, our autumn spirit here, who was struck down by a vehicle. 85% of our birds are. Whoa, sorry, Grace. It's okay. But when we're outside, that actually is good, but not inside. So again, we are a place called Hope. I'm Christine, this is Grace. We do have business cards if you'd like them. It's a good number contact to have in case you have questions or in case you come across an injured animal and you don't know who to call. You can always email us, you can always call us. If it is an animal crisis, please don't go to Facebook and leave us a message. Please call, and if you don't get us, leave a message and go to the next number. We do have a great Facebook page. I hope you will all follow us there. Promise me that, please, because it's really cool to get more numbers after programs, so we'll look forward to that. You guys have been great, and again, we'll stick around and answer any questions if you didn't get a chance.
Thank you so much.
So
Thank you all for coming out. If you didn't get a t-shirt yet, make sure to grab a t-shirt before you leave. And if you have any questions about Suicide Prevention Week events or counseling mental health, we can answer those. Please make sure to attend the Wednesday keynote lecture at 7 p.m. at the Jorgensen.